This is the Let's Go Win podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson.
What is happening, you guys? Welcome back to Let's Go Win podcast. I have a repeat guest from another podcast. Sean Tyler Foley has been acting in film and television since he was 6 years old and is an accomplished film and stage performer. He has appeared in productions including Freddy Vs Jason, Door to Door, Carrie, and the musical Ragtime. Tyler is passionate about helping others confidently take the stage and impact an audience with their stories. He is currently the managing director of Total Buy-In and author of the #1 best-selling book, The Power to Speak Naked. Brother, it's so good to see you again. How you been?
Oh, Jam, I've been having a good time. It's been a busy month and a bit since the last time you and I chit-chatted.
Well, it has on my end as well, but I know you are sought after, my brother. And again, I was fired up to see you on the schedule because you knocked it out of the park on the other podcast. So I can't wait to hear it again. But this audience doesn't know the same story necessarily. So why don't we just start with, so you've been acting since 6 years old. Give me the story, man. How did you get into it, and how did this all even get started?
Well, I was blessed to be introduced to the stage at a young age. When my father passed away, I was 6 years old, and I think my mom and my uncle were kind of looking for an outlet for me. And so that's kind of where they focused their attention. I had done a couple of plays at school and taken a shine to it. And because I didn't really outwardly grieve my father's passing for quite a few years, actually, I think the focus was to get me an emotional outlet so that I could at least process. And so that's where I started. I started on the stage at the ripe old age of 6, and then moved into television and film after that, and had a really good career of it, and then retired from the whole thing after an exhaustive 20 years, and went back to school at 25 and got an engineering degree, studied surveying, essentially. Now that transformed into a safety career somehow, and then that has magically transformed into this wonderful job that I get to do now, and that is travel the world and teach people how to share their story passionately and powerfully.
Why is it so important for people to share their story? That's a common theme I hear, and I get the idea, but I want to hear it from you because obviously it's shaped your career. You're very good at telling stories, but why is it so important for people to really get their story out there?
Well, I think we communicate through story and allegory. And I know Les Brown says it better than I could. Never make a point without a story, never tell a story without a point. And I think the reason that adage is so important is because we conceptualize through the use of story. So if I want to understand how you are feeling, I need you to tell me the story behind the thought process. And that allows me to, right, we never judge a person until we've walked a mile in their shoes. I can't actually do that, but metaphorically I can. If you can tell me the story of what your thought process is, what you were thinking at the time, how you felt at the time, and that allows me to experience those feelings along with you and have empathy or understanding to your point of view. And the more that we can personalize these stories, the more universally we can communicate to one another so that we can really understand where we're coming from.
So I'm guessing you teach people how to get that out there, but let's just say as a listener, someone that talks to people on a daily basis, is there ways to bring their story out of them? Are there certain ways that you can prod and kind of get them to tell you? So, because you mentioned the judgment, right? Like, don't judge anyone until you walked, I think you said, a mile in their shoes or whatever the saying is. But is there a way to really get them to start telling you their story so you can understand them and not be judgmental on something we really don't know anything about?
Yeah. Well, and unfortunately, our mindset with the way that society is today is that pre-rush to feel that we are going to be judged. And I think it has created this real unfortunate situation where people are afraid to speak up and say what they think or how they feel based on this instant especially online, you're going to say a thing, or you're going to type a thing, and instantly you're going to have reactions. People are going to cheer you on, and then you're going to have this instant pushback. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, and any comment board on any chat will reinforce that. But what I would suggest to somebody is, oftentimes the thing that we're afraid to say is what the world needs to hear. A lot of us go around creating this shell, right? Everybody talks about the boundaries that they've created. I've created boundaries. And a good friend of mine actually did a post the other day, Mark Groves. He's an incredible speaker. And he's a relationship coach. So he was talking about boundaries in the extent of relationships. But I would take it one further, our relationship with the world. And I would challenge people to question whether or not they're building boundaries or whether they're building barriers, right? You and I are separated by the longest undefended border in the world. That is a boundary, right? There is nothing that stops me walking across that boundary other than a set of rules that have been established between two countries, two nations, saying that thou shalt not cross unless you follow these processes and do it at our prescribed areas that we would like you to. But it's still undefended and, for the most part, unguarded and unbarriered. So I could theoretically, if I want to, walk directly south from my house, and if I kept going, I would end up in Montana and unaccosted. That is a boundary. The problem is we oftentimes put up barriers, physical, actual walls. You only need to look to the border south to get an example of that. That is specifically set up to deny people into an area. And a lot of times we're doing that in our own personal lives. And so by keeping these our secrets guarded, right? These things that we don't want to share about ourselves, we're really denying the world understanding of why we then behave the way that we do, because then we don't understand. I don't get why you have this boundary, or worse, why you have this barrier. And until you can open up the door to me, I can't cross into your understanding. And subsequently, I'm stuck on the outside, and I will judge, because all I can do is come up with my own scenario for why this behavior or why these actions are taking place.
That's such an interesting, it's literally, as you're talking, I saw a picture of, he's talking about the Canadian USA border, obviously, and then USA Mexico border. There is, in Vermont, actually, part of the boundary is separated by flower pots. And so you're right. It's like, look, if I wanted to walk across, no problem. In fact, in many areas, there's not anything that signifies that this is Canada and this is the US. In fact, there's a city where the library shares the exact same, it's built on both sides. So that's really interesting that people, you're right. So think of it differently, as this is just a boundary, healthy perhaps, but not a barrier. And so you can open yourself up. So how do you tell a compelling story to really incite somebody into your world, for them to really understand who you are? What are there basic tenets to a great story?
Oh, there are. And one only needs go as far as to read, Joseph Campbell's study on the hero's journey, which was his look at, some of the great stories from Plato and Homer, and what makes myth and what makes a compelling story. I mean, and further example to that, George Lucas took the hero's journey word for word and just plotted that into Star Wars. And then if anybody wants a really fun exercise and go, oh yeah, that worked for Star Wars, but where else has it worked? Look at Harry Potter. And then if you ever get a chance, Google the video Harry Potter XX Star Wars. And it's a hilarious retelling of the Star Wars story, only they keep crossing out Luke Skywalker and putting in Harry Potter. So, Luke Skywalker, scratch, Harry Potter is an orphan living with his aunt and uncle, until one day he finds out that his father and mother are, great Jedi, scratch, wizards. And like, it just keeps going like that, right? All good, compelling stories follow this hero's journey model. Now, the key to telling your story effectively and compellingly to an audience is to remember that you are not actually the hero. So when you have gone through all of these trials and tribulations that a hero would go through to then ultimately defeat the arch nemesis at the end of the hero's journey. But in doing that, you now have the knowledge of how to do that again. So when you're telling a compelling story, the key to it is to be the narrator, or in this case, the sage or mentor. So in the hero's journey, we have the hero who is unaware or is just kind of living life. And then a crisis happens that sets their world askew, at which point usually they meet a mentor who guides them through a series of trials and tribulations until they finally, at the end, reach their arch nemesis and find conclusion. So if you can come and present your story as the mentor side of it and inject yourself using language like if you want to and you, then your audience now pictures themselves on that journey. And that's how you tell a compelling story. You invite them into your world by being the sage and the mentor, telling them of how you have accomplished all of these things and what you have learned through it so that they can learn through it. And that keeps them engaged.
And our brain really accepts this idea because we've almost been conditioned. Like, I can understand this, but if you do something totally outlandish, I don't know, like I think of like a Tarantino film or something where it doesn't follow that, or what was it, Memento, where it went completely in reverse or in, different. Is that make it hard for our brains to really follow the story? Is that why those films aren't necessarily as box office hits? Is that the idea?
Yeah. So if you follow the model straight through, you're going to tell a typical myth story, right? Where you're looking at some of those things. And I really like that you brought up Memento, because that is using a device, like you said, going back in time and showing clippets and piecing it together so you don't know what's happening until the very end. Now, the nice thing about that narrative, if you get through to the end, there is a huge payoff for it. But you really have to trust your audience and the storytelling that you're doing to use that device. So could you do it? Yes. Is it recommended? No, because a lot of especially nowadays, we don't even have 30-second attention spans anymore. If you can't catch my attention span in 3 to 4 seconds, I'm out. And that's where, like, if you look at the really successful TEDx talks, they start with an attention grabbing something, whether it's a statistic or just a shocking statement. And then they go into a story. And then they explain how this story impacts everybody who's in the audience, putting, again, them first, put your audience first, and then coming up with the solution. I am the sage, and this is the solution that I'm proposing. And those are all the really good viral TED Talks and TEDx talks kind of follow that model. Could you jump back and forth? Absolutely. But you very likely will alienate your audience because they have to be smart and pay attention. That said, you can have a through line. So again, all of the good TED Talks have a through line. So you may have an end goal and you're revisiting concepts and jumping back and forth. If your audience wants to see a great example of that too, it's not a TEDx talk. I think it's still on Netflix. Mike Birbiglia does a one-man show called My Girlfriend's Boyfriend. It's funny, so it's an easy watch, but he has this through line about meeting his wife. And I actually think the through line is around a couch that they had. Anyway, he keeps coming back to it, right? It's what I call a drop loop. So you introduce a concept and then you just abandon it and you keep going through. But the whole time you're supporting stories that eventually tie back to why this one thing that you mentioned at the beginning is important and there's payoff at the end. But to do it effectively, you do the mini stories. So mini versions of the hero's journey, only in smaller chunks, so that you can still maintain your audience's engagement level and get to the end.
How do you get good at it other than just practice? Like, how did George Lucas go, man, this thing is going to be dynamite? And maybe he didn't know, I don't know. But, how do people get their story so they're like, man, this is going to really click with people? They're going to feel what I'm saying. Or is it just literally trial and error?
It's a lot of trial and error. And I'm so glad that I suppose I brought up George Lucas first, but you keep coming back to him. And this is actually a perfect example of why. The original cut of Star Wars sucked. It was atrocious. And I think he aired it to Steven Spielberg, and I can't remember who else, but a couple of I think Scorsese might have been one of them, and Francis Ford Coppola. But there was a group of those same like-minded filmmakers who were really finding themselves in the mid to late 70s. And I think the story goes that one of them, and I want to say that it was Spielberg, pulled him aside and he's like, "You cannot release this," and kind of said, "I've got this editor who does really good work, and let's repiece it together." And so what Star Wars did was it took a really good story, but it was disjointed at the time. And then in the editing, through trial and tribulation, they came up with what finally got released in 1977 and is now a classic. But the original cut, as George Lucas had it, was atrocious. And so any story can be compelling and any story can fail. It's a matter of finding the nuance and the beats. And I would say, JM, it's probably a lot to do with practice, getting good at your craft, right? All I do all day long is talk to people and teach people how to talk to people. And I have days where I'm on fire. And then I have days where maybe my points don't land as well. And the days where I'm on fire, I make sure to make note. What did I say? What was the beats? How did I do it? So that I can replicate that. And on the days where it doesn't land, I go, okay, well, why not? And through refining and honing my message, I get better and better and better. I ache in it too. So you ready? Story time. If I wanted to get six-pack abs because I've been stuck at home for COVID for the last 16 months and eating more chips and exercising less than what I probably should, I can't watch an exercise video and read a whole bunch of books about the greatest athletes in the world and expect my abs to tighten up. I actually need to move from couch to floor and do a couple of sit-ups. And if I want the ripped pecs to go with it, I got to do the push-ups, right? I can't expect these things to happen if I don't actually put in the effort and the work. And if I do 10 sit-ups right now, I'm not going to have washboard abs. I need to do 10 today, 10 tomorrow, 20 the next day, 20, 30, 40, until I'm doing 100 crunches a day. And then I might be able to do my clothes on my stomach. Until then, I got to put in the work to get to where I want to be.
Yeah, no, I like that. So you're obviously saying, hey, what hit or didn't? I have so many questions because it's fascinating that you said Scorsese, Coppola, Spielberg, Lucas. That's like Pepsi and Coke and like the biggest competitors in the world coming together and saying, look, we're going to work on this together. I think that's fascinating because it's not like Apple and Samsung are saying, hey, let's talk to each other and help each other make your product better. That is remarkable in itself.
Well, but I'm glad, again, thank you for bringing up Apple and Samsung. No, they do not talk to each other, but there is a lot of corporate espionage that goes on. And as soon as somebody puts up a good idea, this person then has to raise the bar. And I think one of the things about having a peer group, so like that film group with Scorsese and Lucas and Spielberg, Coppola, they grew up loving film, going to school. I don't know that they went to school at the same time, but similar peer groups, right? And it's one of those things that if you look at any successful people, they have successful people mentoring them. They have successful people in their peer group, and then they themselves mentor successful people. Because in order for me to get better, I need to be able to not only teach people, I need to be good enough at my craft that I can pass knowledge on to somebody. I also need to have a peer group of people who are going through the same struggles that I am so that I can learn from them and we can vibe off of each other. And I need coaching. I need people who can come to me and say, now try this, now do this. And I'm always looking for mentorship and guidance. I'm always looking to elevate my peer group, and I'm always looking to bring on people who I can then mentor along and pass on my knowledge, because there's no point in me doing this if I'm not going to then pass it on to better other people.
So I want to talk about feedback then, because you said there are days that, look, I'm on fire. I can see, or the audience tells me, Tyler, you killed it. You just dynamite. And other days I can read or see that they're like, yeah, not sure what's happening. Are you giving permission and then asking for the feedback, or are they voluntarily giving it to you? And maybe it's a softball question, but I'm curious on your process of feedback.
It's a combination. So I mean, I know, right? We all have an internal meter. We know when we're doing good and we know when we're not, usually. Occasionally our compass is completely off. You're like, that was great. And everybody goes, that didn't land. You're like, really? I thought it was perfect. And then they come back and tell you why. So there's a little bit of that. But usually I've got a pretty good compass. I know 95, 99% of the time I'm like, oh, that was good. And they're like, yeah, that was good. Or that was bad. And they go, yeah, that was bad. But I will actively invite feedback and input. So, even in our conversations, right? At the end of the podcast, I'm going to say, JM, how did I do? Like, was there anything I could have done more? What do we want to do? And that's important for me because I need to get better at my craft. And particularly with my private coaching clients, my favorite question to ask is, do you understand that, but how did it make you feel? Because I can usually guess by the reaction. So how do you feel about that? And hearing what they have to say, I can start better guided questions on if what I'm explaining to them makes sense. One of my private coaching clients that I was working with this week, actually, Michelle, was she's having to do training videos, right? Online training videos, because everything's online now. And I don't mean to brag, but I think mine are more engaging than most people. And so she's come to me specifically to learn how to be more engaging on camera. And I know her background, and she kept coming up and introducing herself. Hi, I am Michelle. I was like, I get that you have an education background. She's an early childhood educator, but quit telling me your name like it's a question. Hi, I am Michelle. Or like some weird kindergarten character, right? Say it with some confidence. And the funny thing is not only is she an early childhood educator, she is also a roller derby champion. Yeah, I know. So I said to her, when you do this next one, I want you to say it like you are the boss of your company, which she is, or how you would introduce yourself if you were to go into the locker room at Derby. And all of a sudden she was like, hey, I'm Michelle. And I'm like, that's it. Hey, I'm Michelle. And I was like, quit doing this hi up here register thing and bring it down into a source of power. But I needed to give her and the funny thing is, after I gave her the feedback, we watched the video and she was like, oh yeah, no, I get it. And then she reverted back and then it became a struggle. And I'm like, okay, so where is the disconnect? And I had to really explore her language and why that became a default before we could correct her and get her back into standing grounded, finding her power, finding a powerful voice within her, and finding the confidence that what she was delivering was actually a message worth delivering, which ended up being the big problem.
Yeah, it's really interesting, almost creating a persona, although she has that persona when she's playing Derby. So for some reason on this other side, when dealing with kids or whatever, that's interesting. Is that just something, again, 35 years of acting or whatever it's been, my goodness, is that just something you learned and or I'm just curious because I see this often where, right, the tonation and everything, the way you did that, I'm like, yeah, that would be a turnoff for me for sure. Versus, hey, I'm Michelle. Nice to meet you. Like, okay, this gal knows exactly what's happening. So I guess the question is that just something you learned from being a child actor, or is this something you just see in everyday speak?
Well, both. So I think when you're an actor, you have, particularly in film and television, when you go to audition, you do a thing called a slate. And the slate is the beginning introduction to you before you go and do your audition scene. And that is usually the make or break. See, I've been on both sides of the camera when it comes to film and television, because I've not only been an actor, but I've also been a producer. I've also been casting director, assistant, and reader. So I've seen both sides of the audition process. And somebody is on fire when they come in and they're like, hi, my name is Tyler Foley and I'm auditioning for the role of X. Right? They're there, they're engaged, they're happy, they've got their power, versus the people who are like, hi, my name is Tyler Foley and I will be auditioning for the role of, like, it instantaneously. You're like, no, you're not my role. I don't even want to listen to the rest of it. And so I learned very early on how to, first of all, introduce myself. And I definitely credit being an actor for as long as I have with that ability to do it. But then it's still a skill that I've honed even in business, as in networking, and when I take the stage. Right, one of the things when I take the stage, when I'm doing the big presentations, and we've got 5, 6, 7,000 people in the audience, I don't even introduce myself at that point, and I don't take the power away by then reintroducing myself. I'd say the first tip off of an amateur speaker versus a professional speaker, because a professional speaker, the person you always have somebody introducing you, and then they come on and they just take the stage and they go into their delivery and they give you your content. Where an amateur, somebody will deliver you, or somebody will introduce you, and then it'd be like at the beginning of this podcast, if you had done the introduction and then you tell us a little bit about yourself, and I was like, well, my name is Tyler Foley, and like instant credibility loss right there. You've already said what my name is. I don't need to reintroduce myself or give any of the credentials that you've already dropped. If I need to provide more context to where I am, I follow your questioning. And it's just again, practice. I have 35 years of this. I better be good at it.
Is that just a condition, like nicety that, hey, my name is so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. When it's like, I just hear confidence when the way you introduced yourself and came in, you're like, boom, I just heard confidence. So I think anybody listening, they want to be more confident. So is it a conditioned response that we have to overcome? That's how our parents taught us to speak, to say, hi, my name is so-and-so. These are the niceties. Is that what we're battling?
It's a little bit of conditioning, but I think a lot of it. So when you're talking confidence, and you're right, when I walk into an audition, or when I walk on stage, or when I'm first introduced to a client, or when I'm coming on to a podcast, I've learned that I'm there because I'm the authority, right? I've been asked there. So from an audition standpoint, not every actor who was submitted to the casting director got selected. So if I'm lucky enough to be making it into the room, there was already double the amount of people that didn't get to be there. So they wanted to see me for a reason, which means I just need to show up and deliver. So I have the power. And I think that's what a lot of people forget. They give their power away by not taking it or by not claiming it at the beginning, right? In any situation, you have the power. Nobody knows you better than you. And in any presentation, and this is why story is so powerful, because nobody knows your story better than you. And if you can get good and comfortable at expressing who you are through your story, you're unstoppable, because you know you better than anyone else. And all you have to do is claim that power.
Yeah. So you and I both heard and read this. There are people that are more afraid to public speak than they are to die. Okay, that's insane to me, right? But I understand that the fear exists for human beings. I get that. So where the hell does this stage fright, where does it come from? And how do people get over it? How do they come to the table as the authority so that people can? Because I think everybody wants to. They don't want to feel like that. They don't want the anxiety and all the things spiking. But that's a real thing. People literally are so afraid to speak at times. But why?
Well, it boils down to a fear of judgment. So anytime somebody tells me that they're afraid of public speaking, I ask them when the last time they were at a restaurant was, and just what did they order, right? And when they come back and they say, last time I was at a restaurant was a year and a half ago, and I think I got the fish. I go, okay, did you know the waiter before you ordered? And they go, no, why would I know the waiter? I go, okay, great. So what you're telling me is that you spoke to a stranger in public at least a year ago. And they go, yeah. And then, so you're not afraid of public speaking, and it's not that you were speaking to strangers. That is not a fear that we actually have. Why it was so comfortable for you to go into a restaurant and order your favorite dish is because you weren't afraid of the wait staff judging you for your order. And the funny thing is, of all the places where you're very likely to be judged public speaking, it's at a restaurant, because you know that waiter walked away going, I wouldn't have ordered that, but all right, right? here's your extra rare steak, pal. I don't know if you know where we get our bulk orders from, but I wouldn't be doing it. Right? They judge you, trust me. But we're not concerned about that judgment because it has no discernible impact on our day-to-day living. But what happens is if we're asked to give a presentation, or if we're asked to expose ourselves or give of ourselves in a way that we feel uncomfortable, we start projecting other people's judgment onto us. And if you look at what the script that you're telling yourself is, it's probably the judgment that you're judging yourself on. It's not what other people are doing. It's your own inner talk. And so the key to getting really confident and really comfortable public speaking is to recognize that most of your fear is coming from the own words you're telling yourself inside your head. And if people don't believe me, I want them to think of the last time they went to any public presentation, whether that was in a boardroom or if they went to something big like Tony Robbins event, or some kind of self-development seminar, or even a professional development seminar. When was the last time they went and saw a presentation, a keynote speaker, or even just sales stats given to them? And when they were sitting in the audience, everybody right now, when you were listening, or even when JM introduced me, were you sitting there thinking to yourself, man, I hope this sucks? Man, I hope Tyler and JM just fumble the whole way through, that's not on point, and that I don't learn anything, right? None of that you were thinking. You clicked on a button and you started listening, hoping to be educated and hopefully entertained. And I hope I've done both. And when the last time you were at a presentation, at the very most, you had indifference, right? You didn't care if you were there or not. It's on your calendar and you're showing up, right? But nobody is actively hating a presentation before it starts. They may afterwards because you've done a poor job, but that was on you at that point. Your audience wasn't judging you, you were judging you. So you have to take back your authority. You have to know that if you were asked to present, you were asked to present for a reason. You knew more than everybody else that could have been selected, or I promise you, they would have picked somebody else. But they didn't. They picked you. So you just have to show up and deliver. And I think that's the key to it, is knowing that you were selected for a reason. You have the power. So take the power instead of giving it away. And recognize that you don't have to do all the speaking. What makes this a good episode, what makes us have this great repertoire, is I stop so that you can ask more questions. And it's in having a dialogue that we are able to carry on a conversation and explore themes. And you can do that in any presentation.
Yeah, I'm laughing because when you say it aloud, it sounds so ridiculous. You're right. I hope this really sucks today. I paid money to go sit at something that when you say it out loud, I'm laughing. I'm sorry for those of you. I'm trying to stifle it, but it sounds so funny. All right, I'm going to switch gears for just a second. One of the things that you are an expert at as well is networking effectively. What are some of the do's and maybe more importantly, the don'ts to really network well and meet people, and so you can have a more fulfilling life, career, social life, all of that? So what are some of the good do's and don'ts, I guess?
Well, first of all, don't go to a networking event with the concept that you're going to give out 1,000 business cards, because what's going to happen is 998 of your business cards are going to end up in the trash can or parking lot before you ever get there. Same with public speaking. Networking is just a different form of public speaking. And the mindset that you have going into any kind of networking event or networking opportunity will directly impact your success in it. For me, when I go and do networking, and one of the reasons why I'm very effective when I go, is I'm not concerned about getting clients or business. Because networking done properly has nothing to do with either one of those things. I go in looking for strategic partners who I can help and who can help me grow our businesses. I'm looking for a team. I'm looking for people who I can openly and happily recommend to my network, who will see value in what I do and recommend me. I'm not going in going, everybody does the network prayer, right? You're sitting in your vehicle prior to the event and you put your hands together and you go, oh, please let me find at least one decent human being who I can talk to in this thing that will be interested in my services and let me do this, right? Stop worrying about it. Go in looking for strategic partners. And the other thing is, when you get your 30 seconds to introduce yourself, stop introducing yourself and telling your whole backstory. Use the hero journey model and you are the sage. So if I was at a networking event, I would say something like, how many people here are terrified of public speaking? Because statistically, it should be at least 3/4 of you. Well, if any of you are dreading coming to these networking events because you don't like talking to people, especially if you identify yourself as an introvert like me, I have a proven strategy that shows you how to just relax and have people come to you instead of having to go to find all these small, meaningless conversations. So if that's something that's of interest to you, I'd love to have a conversation with you over here. That's it. That's my 30 seconds. I don't say what my name is. I don't say what my product is. I give them insight into what I do, and I address a problem that I can address. Now, what happens is, for the people who are like, yes, that's a thing that I need, now they will come to me and I can have very targeted conversations up front. Everybody else, they are not my client. And now I know who isn't my client so that I don't have to waste time trying to tell them what I do. But the real advantage to that is, now that I know who is not my client and who I don't have to pitch to, I can go and ask them, what do you do and how can I be of service? And if you use that line, what do you do and how can I be of service? Now you can start to catalog people who you can recommend to the clients, because at any networking event, you may be a service provider to 10% that are there, maybe. Even me, people have a fear of 3/4 of the population have a fear of public speaking. Only 8% are going to do anything about that. So I know that if I go to a room of 100, I've got maybe 8 potential clients. So I want to isolate them, get them over to me quickly so that we can discuss. And then I want to find out, what do they do so that I can better serve them. And then I want to get out to the rest of the room and find out, what do they do and how can I be of service to them? What do they need? And then I start introducing people. And that's true networking. When you can be the spider at the center of the web, it is a network. And you just pull this thread and introduce this person to this person. And now they get to meet, and they will remember that you were a solution for them, even though you weren't the service provider for them. And that's where you really rapidly grow your influence. And that's how you can effectively network.
Yeah, man, I wish they'd almost just change the whole idea to just connecting, because that's what you do. You do so well. You connect with people through story. You connect with people through saying, hey, this person might help you. I'm going to shift gears again, just because one of the common things in film and acting is failure, right? Even Spielberg, we're talking about, he got denied. Most people don't know this. 3 times to USC, 3 times. Arguably the greatest director of all time got denied. So I guess my question to you is, what is or was your process of dealing with failure? Because I know every actor I've ever met or talked to, this is just something that you accept and you do X.
Yeah, I'm a fan of metrics, first of all. So I would track all of my auditions down to the point that I knew what I wore, what time of day it was, what if it was a morning or an afternoon audition, who the casting director was, and what I was wearing. And then if I got a call back, and then if I booked it, or how many callbacks I would get, like what was the process. I even tracked how long in advance I got the sides, which are the mini script that you do for the scene, and how long I studied it for, just so that I know where my process was. Because you are going to get rejected, but for every no, there is a yes. Like, I'm a firm believer in the yin and the yang of the universe. Physics doesn't lie. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. The number of times I haven't gotten a role and then had the perfect audition come along, where if I'd have gotten the role, I wouldn't have been available to do the audition, or I would have had a shooting conflict and wouldn't have been able to do the even better role. I can't count the number of times that has happened. Even right now, there's I've signed an NDA, so it's a thing that I can't even talk about in very specific detail. But there is a role that I want, and it's the first audition I've done in a year where I've gotten a callback for it. And this role is so me. But I did an audition about 3 weeks ago that was sort of up my alley. They needed an authentic Irish accent, and my grandparents and great grandparents were all Irish. So it's not a bit of a problem for me to come on and do the bit of an Irish accent and do it at least a little bit so that I'm a touch believable. And I had it down. And then at the last minute, they said, no, we don't want the Irish accent. Well, it was written in script. How you doing now, Dono? Was literally a line. Try saying that without an accent. And I was like, no, this would be a fun role, but it's not probably for me, right? And if I'd have gotten it, the film date would have been right when I needed to do the audition for this super big, super massive project that I want this. I can't wait to be able to tell the world that I got this role. I still haven't gotten it yet, but man, I want it. So the key is to know that it doesn't matter if you get the thing or not, right? Life happens for us, not to us. And the other thing is too, like, I'm a big fan of the 4 agreements, right? Never take things personally, never make an assumption. I've been on the other side of the casting camera, so I know that talent isn't what gets you a role. Talent gets you in the door. Having a good audition helps, but there are so many factors: what your height is, what your skin color is, what your eye color is, what your just everything. Like, there's so many things because it's a big moving puzzle and all the pieces need to fit together. And just because you had the most quote unquote talent doesn't mean you were the best fit for the role. And you could have somebody who is just awful, but a good fit for the role, and now they've got it. So I don't dwell on why I did or didn't get a role. I just got them. I know what steps I can take to set myself up for success because I've tracked it. I know that if I wear a black or blue shirt, audition in the afternoon, and typically audition on a Friday or a Saturday, I'm going to have a better percentage of getting the role. Doesn't mean I'm going to. It just means I'm likely more to do it. If I get my sides at least 3 days in advance and can spend 2 days memorizing them, I have an even better chance of it. But it doesn't mean that I can't get my sides 2 hours before the audition and go in an orange shirt on a Tuesday morning and not book the role. It just means I have to work harder under those circumstances to put myself into the running. And so it becomes work ethic, mindset. All of these things go into getting over the fear of rejection, because people are selfish. It's not you that's being rejected. You just weren't a fit for that scenario. So quit dwelling on why. Don't make assumptions, and don't you gotta let it go.
Well, I can't wait to hear when you got it. Not if, but when. I'm excited to hear what the heck it is. I gotta just talk. Congrats on the book, man. But the Power to Speak Naked. It's a pretty awesome title. So you got to just tell me where did that title come from? It's very cool.
That title came from an argument I was having when I had put together. I was writing the book, and writing the book is a very loose air quotes. The book was actually compiled by taking all of the video that I have done, all the training videos that I've done, transcribing them and putting them together into a cohesive package. And I have a pretty good team who helps guide me through that process. And we were brainstorming, and I said, what is some of the advice that you guys have gotten on public speaking? Because you want a captive title, you want somebody to hone in on it, and you want to address a problem. And so I was like, what are the solutions? And then we'll figure out the problem from there. So what's the advice that you guys have gotten? And one of the first things, if not the first thing, that's one of my team members, one of my friends had said was, picture the audience naked. If you're nervous, you picture the audience naked. No. And I went off on this absolute rant about how it is the worst advice possible. You don't do it. It takes up brain power. Why would you try to find comfort in other people's discomfort or awkwardness or silliness? Like whatever the rationale behind that bit of advice, it is the worst advice on the planet. And so I'm going off on this diatribe and I say, I would rather give somebody the power to speak naked on stage than to have them picture their audience naked. And everybody went, oh, that's the title right there. And then as we explored the title, because that was obviously the title, there are a lot of layers to it. So on the surface, right? Yeah, I genuinely would love to empower somebody to actually be able to stand up naked and it not matter because their story was so compelling, because their presentation skills were so captivating that people were just looking them in the eyes and nowhere else. So could you get up on the stage and speak naked? Absolutely. I want to empower you to do that. But I also hate that everybody is so reliant on props and on PowerPoint and visuals and lighting and AV and sound. Can those things help a presentation? Yes. Do you need them? No. You should be able to go up in a room of just 3 people and deliver such a powerful message that they leave completely changed without the need for everything else. And if you need to add the stuff to make the experience better, great, but the experience should already be magnificent just on its own. And then the sub level to all that, on the deep root of the title, is that I want people to know that the thing they're afraid to say is probably the thing that the world needs to hear. And that in a lot of cases, without hyperbole, it could change the world. If we opened ourselves up to be a little bit more vulnerable and say, this is why I feel this way, or this hurt me, and this is what I'm struggling with, we can start to communicate through the power of story and understand each other better. And so I want people to be able to expose their inner naked truth and be able to tell their story and not be afraid of the judgment, because I promise you, no one's judging you. And the people who are judging you, you want them to, because again, like the networking thing, it alienates the people who you don't want to waste time on. I need to concentrate on the 8% of the room who I can help right now. And I don't care what the other people think about it, because they're not my clients, they're not my tribe, they're not my group, they're not whatever you associate that with. They're not for me. Could they be potential allies in other things? Absolutely. But they're not going to be my core client group. And so don't worry about this isolation. Don't worry about saying a thing that, oh, what if I lose this bit? Well, you probably needed to lose them. Ask yourself why you're struggling to put so much effort into maintaining a relationship that you can't be open and honest about. If you have to be that guarded, it's probably not serving you. And it's freeing too. As soon as you can come out and say these things, oh man, then all the weight is off your shoulder and you can conquer the world. So do it. Don't be afraid to say the thing that's on your heart. The thing you're afraid to say is likely what the world needs to hear.
I can't believe I didn't ask you the first time. I love the way you came up with that. Like literally, I can just see you speaking charged up and it just comes out. And it's like you created something. It was in there, but it had to get like out of there. I like it. Brother, where can our listeners connect with you online and just learn more about what you're doing?
Well, best place to reach me is SeanTylerFoley.com. Sean spelled the proper Irish way. We've already discussed it. SeanTylerFoley.com. And it has everything there. And as always, JM, any of your listeners who want to, right on the landing page, we have the method, which is an 11-page document, 5 insider secrets that are easy to implement, easy to digest, make you a better, more powerful speaker right off the hop. That's free for anybody who wants to download it. And I would strongly encourage your listeners to do that. And just before I do, JM, if you'll indulge me, before they go to the method or before they visit my website, I want them to hit pause on this recording right now. I want them to go to yours, because if they're listening to this right now, if they're getting value from this, there's a lot of work that you are doing behind the scenes. I know I wouldn't have come on this show again and be interviewed with you on a different show, but by you, if you hadn't put in the amount of effort that you do every time. I love coming and being a guest on here. So I want your audience to hit pause right now. Whatever platform you're listening to this, you go over, you give JM a 5-star rating and just say what his work is doing for you. Because a lot of times it goes unrewarded and it's a thankless job. And I have the luxury of, as a guest, to just come on and show up and be shiny. but the work that JM has to put into the background is thankless. And the least it deserves is a 5-star review. So if you're enjoying this podcast or any of the other ones that he's published, please hit pause right now, go give it a 5-star review. And when you hit play to come back to this, now you go over to SeanTylerFoley.com, pick up a copy of the method, and I'll be happy to help you out.
Brother, you are the man. I appreciate that. I literally have an outro now. I just have to put pause. I got to cut that and put it right into the outro because you do that so well. Brother, hey, thank you for, again, bringing all of the energy, the insight, everything that you bring. It's just, it speaks to so many people because we public speak everywhere, and you have so much to offer. Go check them out, you guys. And thank you again, brother.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Jam.
All right, you guys, I literally sitting there looking at, I speak for a living, and I've learned every time I listen to him, he has so much to give and there's so much to learn. He is an expert. Check it out. We use it with our wives. We use it with our coworkers, with all of our family members. You're speaking. Why not get better at it? So, all right, you guys, until next time, continue transcending life. We'll talk to you then. Thank you so much for listening. If this content is delivering value to you, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review us. That helps us build this community, and that is what we are all about. Building this community as big as we can, helping as many people as we can, and deliver as much value as possible. Be sure to head over to letsgowinpodcast.com for information on my coaching courses, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Let's Go Win 365. Let's go win and transcend in life.
This is the Let's Go Win podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson.